This is COMP1010 at the University of Manitoba, and in this video I'm going to go over color basics in processing. So color, when you are using that on a computer, you need to be able to specify what color to use when something is going to be put on the screen. And there's sort of two basic approaches. You can do regular colors that are what you think of with different hues, or you can do grayscale, and we're going to go over both of these options. So let's start with grayscale because it's easiest. Grayscale is specified as a number between 0 and 255. 0 is black and 255 is white. And some number in the middle will be representative of something in the middle in terms of gray values. So 128 is a medium gray, 60 is dark gray, and so on. So you may wonder, why 255? That's kind of a weird number. And this is a bit of an advanced topic. You don't need to understand this, but in case you're curious, computers, as we talked about, use bits or switches. So any bit can be either 0 or 1, on or off. And if you only have one switch, then you can only represent black or white. If you had two switches, you could represent 4 possibilities: 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, and 1, 1. So you'd be able to represent black, white, and 2 versions of gray. If you add another switch, then you get more possibilities. And if you put 8 switches together, then you get 256 possible combinations. And 8 switches, or 8 bits, is what in computer terminology we call a byte. So a single byte can represent anywhere between 0 and 255 in terms of values of grayscale. And so that's where that number comes from. So you'll see 0 to 255 is a really common range in computer programming. So RGB is the color space that is most commonly used when we're working with computers, and it stands for red, green, blue. So you can think of these as the computer's primary colors. And they're similar to, but not exactly the same as what you were probably taught as the primary colors in elementary school. In elementary school, you're taught that the primary colors are blue, red, and yellow. But in computers, it's blue, red, and green, or RGB, red, green, blue. And so it's slightly different, but it's additive in the sense that when we add these colors together, we're adding more light reflection. And so if you have lots of red, lots of green, and lots of blue, then you have a really, really light color. And if you've got all of them, then it's white. And if you have the absence of red and the absence of green and the absence of blue, then you have no light reflecting, and so you have black. And this inset over here is actually a super zoomed in picture of pixels. And so you can see that on computers, a pixel is actually represented as a collection of red, green, and blue values together. But to the human eye, when you're zoomed out, you just see a color. You don't see those individual parts. All right. So when we're programming and processing, there are 3 main things that we can change in terms of color. We can change the background, which is the whole canvas. And whenever you change the background color, it will replace everything on the canvas with that color. So stuff that had already been drawn will disappear. And then you can change the stroke, which is the line color. So if you're using lines, or if you're using other shapes that have an outline, like a rectangle or an ellipse, then that's you can change the outline color using stroke. And then you can change the fill color for shapes that can be filled, like rectangle or ellipse. So it's important to note that you need to set the color before you draw the shape in order for the shape to show that color. So let's talk about how this works with grayscale. So if we wanted to set the background to be medium gray, we would do this. So the identifier is background, and then we have one parameter, and that's the input to that command. So the background command says change the background color, and we have to say what we're changing it to. And so the parameter is this grayscale value, and if you use 128, that'll set the background to medium gray. Similarly, if we want to change the line color, we use the stroke command, and we can send it one parameter, a value between 0 and 255. If we send it 0, it will set the line to be black. If we sent it 128, then it would set the line to be medium gray. And then similarly for fill for shapes, one parameter again. If we use one parameter, it's going to be a number between 0 and 255. So 255 will set the shape fill to be white. All right. If we want to use colors instead of grayscale, then we need to use 3 parameters, one for each of the red, green, and blue values. So what we're saying is how much red, how much green, and how much blue to show. So here's an example. If we wanted to set the background, in this case, we're saying don't have any red, have a whole lot of green and a whole lot of blue, and this will turn into a light greenish blue, almost like a cyan color. And then if we wanted to set the line color to red, we could do 255 and then use 0 and 0 for the green and blue arguments. If we wanted to fill, say, a rectangle with purple, then we could do 255, 0 for the green and 255. So that's lots of red and lots of blue, and red and blue together typically make purple. That's what we think of when we think of mixing colors. But mixing colors on computers is a little different, and it's not always intuitive. So this one, if this fill command says, let's have lots of red and lots of green and no blue. So what happens when you mix red and green? If you do this with paints, you'll get some muddy color. But on computers, red and green actually make yellow. So this is where the computers, the RGB color is a little bit different than what you may be used to from primary school and paints. Okay. We can also use transparency, and this is really fun. So you can set the fill color of something, but then you can actually make it so that you can sort of see what's behind by setting a high level of transparency. And so transparency is also often known as an alpha value. So this works if we send in 4 parameters instead of 3. So let's take a look at this example to see how this works. Here we have a big black rectangle. This is the code here. And then we have a series of 4 squares, 1, 2, 3, 4. The top one is that light greenish blue. So here we've done a fill 0, 200, 200, and we've got this. And so it's just this cyan color, and it's not transparent at all. So we can't see the background behind it. We can't see this black rectangle behind. The second square, we've set it at about a 50% transparency. So we've got 0, 200, 200, and then we've got this 4th parameter here. So this is a 4th value we're sending in, and it's about halfway between 0 and 255. Not quite, but close to halfway. And if we look at the way this looks, you can see that you can sort of see through this. You can see the white background a little bit more. This is lighter than that, and you can see this black rectangle behind. The third one, we've set the parameter to be a really low value. That's a low alpha value, which means very high transparency. So this small number means that this one, it almost looks like there's no fill at all. It's barely there. You can sort of just see a little bit of that bluish green. And then the 4th one, the value is high. It's almost 255, 230. So this is only very slightly transparent. It's almost completely opaque. It looks a lot like this one, but you can just see behind a little bit. So if you add in this 4th parameter, that will specify how transparent a shape is. Last, there are 2 other things you might want to know. Processing has a color selector tool that you can use. So this is a little screenshot over here. Here's the color selector. You get it from the tools menu in processing, and you can play around and choose a different color, and say we want this muddy brown color. We can click the copy button down here. It'll take this magical value right here, and you can then paste that into a fill or a stroke or a background. So you see these numbers look quite different. What this number is a hexadecimal representation of color. It's advanced, you don't need to memorize that term, but it's just for your interest. So this is another numbering system. We've talked about decimal, we've talked about binary, where in binary there's 2 digits. In hexadecimal there's 16 digits. So this uses numbers and letters to represent all 3 of the RGB colors together in a nice compact form. So this is a hex color code, and it can be pasted in and used as well. Finally, line thickness. Nothing to do with color really, but if you're drawing a bunch of things and changing and playing around with this, you might want to make lines thicker so that you can actually see their color better, and you can do that using the stroke weight command. So if you set stroke weight to 1, that's kind of the default. That's a nice thin line. You can set it to 2 or 3. You can set it up to 20, which would give you a gigantic fat, thick line. So that's another option you have for adjusting your drawings. All right, so let's get processing up and see how this works. So here we have a processing sketch, and it's not doing very much right now. Let's run it. It has a black background of 0, and it's got 2 rectangles. And if we don't specify anything, we get a line thickness, stroke weight of 1, stroke color of black, and fill color of white. Those are just the defaults, but we can change all of this. So we can set our background to be something quite different. So if we set this to something like 80, 180, and 80, that's a little bit of red, a lot of green, and a little bit of blue. And so let's see what that gives us. That gives us a nice kind of mid-flat kind of green, slightly bright, not too bad. And then we can change the fill color of one of our rectangles. So let's make this rectangle maybe a dark blue. So a little bit of red, a little bit of green, and some blue. We don't want to make it too bright, so we're going to not set that too high. Oh, and so it's interesting to note what happened here. So the background was green. This fill, which is this dark blue, applied to this first rectangle. It also applied to the second rectangle. So until I change this, any shape that I draw is going to be that color. But if I want this second rectangle to be a different color, then I need to use another fill. So let's make this one maybe yellow. So we'll go 220, 220, and 20. Let's see what kind of yellow that gives us. And now we have a blue rectangle and a yellow rectangle. And we can actually also, again, play with transparency, as I mentioned. So let's try to make this yellow rectangle really transparent by adding a 4th parameter. So remember that for lots of transparency, we actually want a low number. So let's go with, say, 40, and we'll see how that looks. Okay, so here, this yellow is almost not even visible. So maybe that's too transparent. Let's try 140. And there we go. So that's looking a little bit more yellow, and then you can see how transparent it is because you can see the bottom corner of that blue rectangle. All right, one last thing, let's show the color selector. So we go to the tools menu, color selector, and here's our color selector. So you can play with different hues here. So say we wanted this a crazy pink hue, and then we drag this around to different sort of bright, dark, different values of it. So say we like that pink right there, and we want to use this pink for one of our rectangles. Here's the code. We copy the code, and we come over here, and we can replace the R, G, and B values, but not the transparency, with that code, and then run that. And here we have our pink value, but it's kind of transparent, so it doesn't look quite like that because of the transparency effect. All right, so hopefully that gives you a pretty good rundown of how you use colors in processing, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.